Welcome to the second part of the interview with Beaver Yoder, beef cattle producer in Jackson County, Florida. Beaver is specialized in grazing stocker cattle in winter cover crops, and he's here to share a little bit of his experience in the cattle industry and how he makes his production system work. If you have not yet listened to the first part of the interview, I encourage you to do so because a lot of the things we're talking here are complementary to the first section. So, Beaver, how was that transition from dairy into row crop, and then let's stop the row crop and just focus on the cattle. So from cattle to crop back into cattle, and then specifically with the stockers.
I was born and raised right here, North Florida. Been here my whole life, and I appreciate just what we're doing right here in the university and the extension service, and how I've been able to learn so much through the university system, research. When you study systems and you talk to experts like Jose and Marcelo and what they've done and research, and you just start to learn those things, it starts a process in a person where they want to try things. And the best way to do this is try it and figure it out yourself. For me, it was unique from a farming perspective. I wanted to learn how to be a better farmer and a better producer. And then through that, I just always have had this love of cattle. The late Dr. Wright and his research, forage research and crop systems, and just understanding the value of what we can do if we put cattle into it. But I just hate to see this open farm ground sitting here for 4, 5, 6 months out of the year, and the wind blows and there goes topsoil. I just hate to see it. A big rain comes and it's dirty water running off of a farm field, versus a cover crop where a cover crop or a grazing crop, and you've got clean water coming off of that field and you don't see the topsoil blowing. For me, that's all I want to do. And then from there, the stocker business intrigued me from an economics versus a cow-calf. And I just started learning the stocker business, and it's just kind of the next phase of the cattle industry and or the cattle business, and I have an interest in it. By doing the stocker business, a producer can have more head of cattle than you can with a cow-calf operation. For me, it was a limited acreage from a pasture standpoint, so I could do more cattle from a stocker business.
Important point, Beaver, is that with this fallow land opens up space for the young generation, the young farmers, to potentially get into the stocker business. So why don't you see more people doing what you're doing? Why don't you have more beavers?
I'm gonna throw this in there. I had a mentor tell me one time, the cattle business is simple. The hard part is keeping it simple. And many times in agriculture, with good intentions, a lot of times we end up complicating things. We make things a lot harder than it should be. Back to myself, I'm a learner. I like to learn. And if you don't have a growth mindset, it's hard to learn some things. Why don't we see more? That I don't have a good answer for that. It's not your normal way that you see agriculture across the Southeast.
Yeah, I don't think you see it anywhere where, this is actually one of the hot spots in terms of grazing winter annuals on cover crops. Like this is the good part of the United States. So
you don't see that. So young people don't grow up seeing it. It's not your normal agricultural systems that you see in the Southeast. You don't see it as a normal. There's just not a lot of us that do what I do. And so you don't see it a lot. And it can be intimidating if you're not raised up in it.
It takes a set of skills, right? That it takes time to learn as well. So how can you break that,
Yeah, it is a set of skills. So real quick, we talked about stocker business. You got the preconditioned side, then you got the grazing side or the growing side, the producing side. So don't get me wrong. You, as a cattle owner, you can buy cattle, you can precondition them. Now we can feed them in a feedlot system, or we can graze them. There's other ways. So we're talking about producing, we're talking about growing. So then if you want to be a grazer, so there is a skill set to learn to graze cattle. And it's not hard, but it does take some time to learn. So it's, you know, it's one of those things where you have to find some mentors that can help you learn that process.
I really love your comment about beef cattle is a simple system, but we make it complicated. And do you think that's this complexity is what keeps people away, or maybe even not keeping people away, but keeps people from making a profit?
Generally, we have agriculture, and you drive by a farm field, you see a brand new John Deere tractor out there running. That kind of has an intrigue to a young person to see that vision out there. But there's not a lot of intrigue to stocker cattle. I mean, it's not something that you go, boy, I want to grow up and be like that.
Yeah, and I'm just reading Chris's mind here is probably thinking all that immobilized capital and all that depreciation cost and that new big tractor.
I was at the National Farm Machinery Equipment Show this year, and I'm pretty sure that everything was about 200 horsepower higher than what I needed. So they don't make people that farm my size for that. The infrastructure just not there. And then whenever you think about the time that you spend, you're cycling these nutrients on their farm. And I think so many people kind of they get closed off and think about what they can do on what they own, and they think about that long-term investment. Whereas, you know, we're kicking cattle out there on places that we may have to figure out new ways to provide water. You know, we may have to put up some fence in some cases, or just backstop it. And you know, it's the relationship, building relationships with people. It's so much easier to build relationships with cattle.
One time I asked a question in terms of what type of contracts we needed to go into this business, and you told something in the tune of it's not really the contract, it's the trust and the relationship, which is what Chris meant. So it's a connection to a much deeper level. How do you get started on that? Especially, basically, you have to convince someone that has that land that is in fallow during the winter, and we're going to say, hey, I can help you improve your land.
So Chris mentioned that about relationships, and this is a relationship business. I think in all of agriculture, you know, it's relationships, but I think in the beef industry, it's kind of a different world when we talk about relationships. But back to your question, how do you convince someone to say, hey, we can improve your land if we work together here? My job is not to convince somebody. That's your job. That's you as a university. That's you as researchers. And that's a challenge in itself. But me as a cattle owner, it is not my job to convince a farmer or a row crop producer or landowner to do this. They have to see it. They have to want it.
So perhaps the strategy is to potentially work with those row crop farmers to show them the benefit, and then have those examples.
Yeah, that's correct. Culture plays a bigger role in these questions that you're asking, and we've already kind of been there. But the culture of our southeastern agricultural operations are somewhat set, and culture takes a long time to shift. And sometimes the industry is forced into shifting, and sometimes change happens because of desire to change. And if you go back 30, 40 years ago, we did some of this, not to this level, but the Southeast had a lot of more cattle livestock integrations farming systems, and we went away from that. So that was a cultural shift that happened. And so I think it's in the same way. This takes time to have that cultural shift, whether we desire it or whether we're forced into it.
If we would, let's run through just like a typical production season for you. Probably starts in the summer and then runs through the spring.
You're talking about the stocker business? Yeah, that's correct. So typically in the Southeast, when we're talking about stocker business, we're talking about a fall, winter, early spring system. And so typically a cattle owner, a stocker operator would buy calves, generally unweaned calf in the fall of the year, spend 6 to 8 weeks preconditioning that animal, getting it ready to go. So if you look at the systems of a row crop producer, they would harvest a crop, be harvested early October, plant a cover crop that may be ready to graze by Thanksgiving to the middle of December, and then you would have some as a cattle owner, you could put cattle out there to graze. So then if you can graze those cattle, say to April 15 to April 30, those calves, those stocker calves, are now heavy feeders that are desirable for feed yards in the Midwest. So you've got a heavy feeder that's born and raised in the Southeast that will go to a feed yard and be fed through the summer, can handle the heat. And so we're producing a feeder animal at a time of year that the rest of the country's doesn't have any available. So we can produce those calves, sell them April and May, and they'll go west. At the same time, that's the time when a farmer's ready to turn his farm ground back into a cropping system and can start planting peanuts, April 15 to April 30, or cotton crop after that. So that's typically our system. If you have overseeded summer pastures, that's not a farming operation. Maybe you have ryegrass, you can graze those cattle on out into May and utilize that ryegrass further out. But then it turns into summer heat, and our high quality winter forages have died, and so by that time you generally take those stocker cattle off of that as a heavy feeder. Then sometimes, in the summertime we do buy calves and graze a summer program, which is a whole different system.
What's a target gain for you?
Yeah, so typically, in general terms, we're talking about 2 pounds a day on average in 120 days of grazing.
Yep.
And if it's a normal year, 2 pounds. If it's not so good, maybe 1.7 pounds. And if it's a good year, 2.3 pounds a day gain over that 120 day grazing period.
How about the stocking rate?
Yeah, so the stocking rate can vary according to soil types, can vary according to forage types. But just a general rule of thumb is you plan for 900 pounds to the acre. So if you are starting with a 450 pound steer or heifer, you would put 2 head to the acre. If they're a little bit bigger, you would put less heads to the acre, 1.7 head to the acre. That's just kind of a general rule that I use, is 900 pounds to the acre.
Would you please explain a little more on the buying and selling side of things?
Yeah, so in good business, we have to differentiate the different enterprises. So you have cattle ownership, buy and sell that animal. That's an enterprise in and of itself. And then you grow that animal. So you need to grow it at a cost that's sufficient for you, whether you do that yourself or you pay somebody else to grow it for you. An example of a farmer contract grazing for you. So you have a purchase of an animal. Generally, we want to put 250 to 300 pounds gain on that animal and sell it as a feeder calf. So what do we do to put 300 pound gain on as cheap as we can? That's what our goal is. So we buy an animal, we put gain on as cheap as we can, and we sell the animal. typically in the Southeast, we have stockyards that you may have an order buyer that you can buy that can buy calves for you and put together loads of the same type and kind that you would buy calves, and that's what I precondition. That's what I buy as the stockyard calves. There's also the maybe a neighbor has 30 or 40 head that you can negotiate on and buy that from a neighbor, or some larger ranching operations where you can buy a truckload lot from one. But so we buy that, and then typically we would sell those calves through an auction system. They're 750 plus in weight. They'll go to a feed yard. If they're less than that, they may, depends on the time of year, they may go to a grazing operation in the central part of the United States for summer grazing.
A lot of our farmers, a lot of our beef cattle producers are small. Many of those are cow-calf, and they don't have the capacity, the scale to make it profitable. I always thought, well, let's try to do some stockers because you can have much more gain, and it's a much more liquidity on the product you're producing. But then I came to realize that if you don't have a good buying and selling strategy, you're really not going to make a lot of money on stocker, because that part, buying and selling, is just as important as the actual production side.
I'll let Chris talk to it a little bit, but I'll just say this real quick. Some producers that have a cow-calf mentality sometimes can't see this. But if you think about, as a producer, you're raising a calf. What does it cost to produce that calf? And everybody has a different cost structure, but is it $800 a head? Is it $1,000 a head, or $1,200 a head? So when you wean that calf, maybe you're going to wean him and grow him in a stocker deal on your own place. Can you go buy a calf for that same amount of money? In some years, you can buy them cheaper than you can grow them yourself. In some years, it costs more than you can do it yourself. But let's just say it's equal. You've spent an entire 12 months producing a calf for $1,000. Or you can go to the stockyard and you can buy that calf for $1,000 in one day. So instead of working all year, you can buy that calf in one day. And you can buy 100 of them. And you can graze them and make a load. So let's just say you're a producer. You have 50 head of calves, and you go buy another 50. Now you have 100. You can make a truckload out of it.
I'm going to take a slightly different aspect of it. Let's talk about the educational aspect of it. So we have approximately 14,000 farms in Florida that have cattle on them. At my 8.5 years in Florida as an educator, how many producers want to precondition their calves? What percentage? Just give me a round number. It's low.
5.
It's low.
5%.
Okay, so if 5% want to precondition, how many percent really do you think want to be stocker operators? If they don't want to precondition cattle, when Beaver wakes up in the morning, he wants to wean, he wants to get a weaned calf, and he wants to go ahead and take it through that preconditioning, get the sickness behind it, and take it where it can be a productive, viable animal that's going to be in our beef system. And unless that's what you wake up wanting to do, you don't need to be in the stocker industry, because the money is made in that preconditioning part. Kicking them out there on the winter grazing, they can, they're going to pretty much do it themselves. But in that preconditioning system where 5% of our producers want to precondition their cattle, that is the portion where the money is made. And that's where you are the stocker operator. The cow-calf, completely different, completely different side in terms of the consideration, in terms of the production, things that you need to think about, the genetics and things like that. Just completely different considerations. Thank you, Chris. That's an important part to understand. It's a very critical point. And I don't want to insult people's knowledge here,
but there's three parts of the industry. You got the cow-calf industry, you got the stocker industry, you got the cow-calf phase, you got the stocker phase, and you got the feedlot phase. That's your three parts of the industry. And to go from cow-calf, which the product that's sold there is a unweaned calf, to the stocker business, that's a big transition of product. The product is an unweaned calf, and then you're going to make a stocker calf out of it. What Chris is saying is that's a skill set and a mindset that if you're in the cow-calf business and you don't like that, or you don't understand that, or you don't want that, you don't need to be in the stocker business. It's a completely different mindset. And those people that do that, they have that knowledge and that skill in that. And it truly terrifies people to think about weaning calves. I do it every day. I love it. It's something I enjoy doing, is taking a raw product, and I'm calling that raw product an unweaned calf, and making something out of him. And that's moving him to the next phase in life. I love to do that, but it terrifies a lot of people.
From birth to when they're going to be harvested. This 60 days, this is the most difficult part of beef production. Everything else is simple.
A cow-calf operation produces an unweaned calf. That's what a cow-calf operations product is. And there are people that are very, very skilled at that, mm-hmm. and do a great job at that. But there's the next phase.
So if I was to get into the stocker business, or as educators advise people to get or not get into the stocker business, what would be the parameters? What would be the basic things I need to have in mind? Talking about production capacity, number of animals, minimum number of animals, truckload. We mentioned truckload, access to product, access to land.
Okay, so I would always advise someone, you got to dip your toe in the water just a little bit with the potential loss in terms of, this is the most difficult 60 days of their entire life. You got to be good at it. Being bad at this 60 days, the tuition there is life changing. You will go bankrupt. There is so many farms over the last 5 years that have had 20+% death loss, where it's hard to come back from whenever you have a train wreck. You don't get the farm back to where it is. You start having to liquidate a lot of things. So, I mean, this is just one of those considerations where do I start is I got to make sure, one, this is something I'm going to want to do. I'm going to do it well. And then I want to expand and get in size, because at the end of the day, if we're going to dedicate a lot of our time to this, this phase of the cattle industry, we got to get to the point where we can make a viable living, an economic unit eventually. So we do have to ramp up in terms of numbers, and if we don't already have a lot of the assets in terms of land, then these are the types of things that we have to look at is getting out on row crop land, using some other people's land if we don't already have some of those land resources. But we do have to have a home unit where we're, raising and we're preconditioning these cattle, and then have a place that potentially that we're shipping them out to.
To answer your question, you have to have a good relationship with a veterinarian that can help you through that process, that weaning and precondition process. And in the same vein, and this is not to knock individuals, there are veterinarians that are very skilled cow-calf operations, and then there are veterinarians that are skilled in a stocker business. And it's one thing when you're a farmer with 100 head versus a stocker operator veterinarian that's assisting with a 2,000 or 3,000 head operation. That's a completely different work, if you might say. So to have a great vet relationship is something. You got to have great mentors. Unfortunately, in the Southeast, there's just not a lot of us that do this, and in other places of the United States, this is more prevalent. But we have to remember, we are a cow-calf area. And so we produce a lot of calves, and then we export these calves elsewhere. And other stocker operators elsewhere buy our calves and do the work there. So I'm excited about how we do it here in the Southeast. We keep those calves here. We add value to them. It brings value to the producer that produced that calf, and then the whole ag industry in the Southeast. We can create that value. But like Chris said, you have to pay the tuition, and you have to learn it, and you have to figure it out.
No, I think it was a great conversation. And thanks again, Beaver. Every time you talk, I learn something new.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But thank you. No, I think it's just an amazing industry. It really is.
It is.
And everything from producers to researchers to I mean, it's a team effort in this deal. And
we have so much to learn from each other.
Yeah.
There are so many actors, and each one with a different perspective. But when we start working together, we really see how big of impact we can make it here.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cut of beef?
What's my favorite cut of beef? I'm just tell you, I just love a good hamburger.
Okay.
I just do.
Uh-huh.
And at our home, we use a lot of hamburger, and we use it in a lot of different areas. But I just love a good hamburger.
Taco Tuesday.
There you go.
Yeah. Awesome.
Don't get me wrong. I love a good steak.
Yep.
And my wife, she does a great job with roast and so
There's no bad cut.
There's no bad cut. It's all
could
good.
be a bad
That's
cook,
right.
but not a bad cut. Beaver, thanks so much for your time, for all the knowledge you share with us today. It's fantastic to hear you and put into perspective the things we think we know in the technical side and put really into work in a real world. That's fantastic. Dubeux, thanks a lot for participating here. Chris, pleasure being with you again here in Mariana.
Great conversation today.
Yep. Looking forward for our next steps on this integrated crop livestock system project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this Cow Talks podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation.
If you have any questions, ideas, follow-ups, or comments, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu. That is forages@ifas.ufl.edu. Or find us on our social media, uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube.